Billionaire Barry Sternlicht warns of hard landing, says economy is going to implode. Billionaire Barry Sternlicht, chairman and CEO of Starwood Capital Group, has warned that the U.S. economy is going to implode, emphasizing that interest rates have to fall. He further stressed that the economy will have a hard landing. Barry Sternlicht on hard landing, economic implosion. The chairman and CEO of Starwood Capital Group, Billionaire Barry Sternlicht, discussed the state of the U.S. economy in an interview with CNBC on Thursday. Following the Federal Reserve hiking interest rates by 25 basis points.
Barry has been vocal for quite a while with us, talking about how he thinks the Fed should have stopped raising rates sooner. So, Barry, what's your reaction to the Fed's move yesterday?
How much time we got? Look, I think Chairman Powell's in a really tough spot. You have a federal government that's spending money at a rate of $1.7 trillion. That was 1.6 in 20 and 21. So you have the biggest customer of the whole economy, the federal government across the hill, spending money as fast as they can. And they're not actually changing their spending patterns based on his interest rate raises. So the only place he's going to impact is private enterprise. And while I thought my comments on not raising really reflected what I saw going on in the fixed asset markets like real estate, I didn't really look at what was happening and what they were doing and what the impact would be on the banking system. So I think that he obviously, I think he didn't need to do what he did yesterday. I think to say that the economy isn't going to slow down because of the regional banking crisis, and to even pretend that these banks are solvent, as he said. They're solvent when they can borrow $300 billion from the Fed overnight and borrow more money than they did in the 2007, 2008 crisis. And it's all their fault. There are 400 PhDs at the Federal Reserve, 400. This weekend, me and two of my colleagues went through 6 regional banks. And if you had to mark them to market, they're all insolvent. Now, why are they insolvent? I heard Joe say earlier about the missing risk officer. Actually, it was the rule book set up by the government. The government said that if you own 10-year fixed agencies, mortgage backs, or you own treasuries, it's 1/5 the capital requirement than if you went out and bought floating rate notes, senior secured floating rate notes. So you wound up with a situation, the banks were following the rules. They were following the rules, and they did not have to mark those securities to market. We run the nation's largest $1 million in securities. We're 90% rate hedged. It couldn't have happened to us, but because the banks faced no consequences with the held to maturity category, they decide to save some money and not put any hedges in place. That's irresponsible, but it is the rule book that the OCC and the government, the Treasury, and the Fed oversaw, and they didn't even stress test these banks if rates rose. So they should have been the first ones to see what they were doing to the regional banks. And by raising interest rates, even yesterday, they're just increasing the losses in the regional banks, which means they still have to go and borrow additional capital from the Fed. So it's sort of like what he said was disingenuous, right? Yes, if you have an unlimited borrowing capacity from the federal government, you have a sound regional banking system. And the regional banking system is not small. I was actually surprised that it makes 70% of all commercial real estate loans. And it's the guy who wants to buy a tractor or the guy who wants to fix up that little shop on this corner. And it's going to be pretty hard for the JP Morgans, though I adore them, or the B of A's, who I also like, or the Goldman Sachs's, who don't really do that, but our national bank, to actually replace the system. And what the effect will be, or will accelerate what I talked about earlier, which is that the crisis in real estate and in fixed assets is slow. And as loans mature, and you're seeing every day you'll hear about an office building going back to a bank, and that the Fed was also all over they were spending a lot of time on the systemic banks and telling them, do not increase your exposure to office buildings and real estate. Well, I just wonder who on earth they think is going to refinance that office building on Park Avenue. And I think if you take that to its logical conclusion, values will drop. It's a $3 trillion asset class, office buildings in the United States. It's not small. And it's a